Hello and welcome to this session. My name is Matt Pieklik. I am a consulting analyst here at Vectra. In this session, I will discuss a use case where Vectra helped a SOC identify and stop an attacker, preventing data loss. Before I jump into the use case, let me provide some background on the scenario. First, Vectra's customer was a global pharmaceutical company working on COVID-19 research and vaccine manufacturing. At the time, they had some highly sought after intellectual property as no vaccines had been released yet. They suspect they were targeted by a nation state sponsored group based off of evidence they collected and their collaboration with the FBI after their investigation concluded. This organization had deployed a sophisticated multi-layered security stack to provide protection when employees were on site, as well as working remotely without forcing all of their traffic through a traditional remote access VPN. In addition to this perimeter security, they also had deployed EDR and endpoint protection clients to their user machines. Lastly, they had deployed Vectra's Cognito Detect to help identify attackers that may have circumvented preventative security measures, and Cognito Recall, which provides visibility into network metadata, facilitating deeper investigation into suspected threats. What I'll be focusing on today is Cognito Detect's and Recall's roles in assisting the SOC with identifying and stopping this attacker. I will refer to these two products as Detect and Recall during the presentation. Detect and Recall played a part in assisting the SOC in this scenario. However, other tools came into play as well, and they will be called out as appropriate. So what is Detect or Recall exactly? Detect identifies discrete attacker behaviors that can be observed in raw network traffic, Azure and Office 365 logs, as well as AWS CloudTrail logs. These behaviors are combined at the host or account level to provide a prioritization based on threat uncertainty scores that Detect's AI generates. This helps to prioritize what needs attention for the responders. Digging deeper into this, Cognito sensors consume raw network traffic or logs and generate metadata that is forwarded to and utilized by Cognito Detect to identify attacker behaviors. Behaviors can fall within one of 5 scored categories, which are command and control, reconnaissance, lateral movement, and botnet, as well as an informational category. The generated metadata can also be sent off to a local data lake with Cognito Stream or to our SaaS offering with Cognito Recall. Both solutions provide information that is incredibly useful in threat hunting or investigation. The metadata that is available provides visibility into 11 network protocols plus connection information. These metadata streams are enriched with additional information which provides context on the host, the account, and observations Detect has identified regarding those hosts or accounts. These types of metadata played a key part in identifying the attacker's actions and footprint within this environment during this investigation. On day 1 of this attack, an employee of the pharmaceutical company was contacted via social media by someone pretending to be a recruiter for a competitive company. The recruiter asked the employee if they would be interested in in an open position they had. The employee responded that they would be interested in learning more about the position. The actor then sent an email with a QR code containing a link for a document with a job description. It is unknown if this was a coincidence or by design, but the employee's phone was unable to open the document. The employee and actor communicated further regarding the inability to open the document and discussed opening it on a different device. The following day, the employee and actor agreed on using an encrypted messaging app to deliver the document. The employee utilized a web version of the messaging app to download the document to their corporate laptop. The laptop was not currently in the office. However, it was configured to utilize the organization's cloud-based security stack when accessing the internet. When the employee attempted to open the weaponized document, however, it would not open and the exploit within the document failed to work. The employee and actor continued to communicate regarding the inability to open the document at this point. The following day, on day 3, the employee was now in their office. Their laptop was still accessing the internet through the cloud security stack based on their location. The actor delivered a third weaponized document to the employee, who downloaded it through the encrypted messaging app once more. This time, the document opened and the exploit worked successfully against the employee's machine. Shortly after the initial exploit, the actor performed some basic network reconnaissance from that employee's machine. Detect triggered 2 detections based on this reconnaissance: port sweep and file share enumeration. Both of these detections are in the reconnaissance detection category. The port sweep detection indicated that the actor was searching the network for SMB file servers. The file share enumeration detection indicated that the actor was enumerating the file shares of the file servers, that the actor found. From a prioritization standpoint, the employee's host was placed in the high quadrant on Detect's dashboard due to its host scores having greater than 50 for the threat score and less than 50 for the certainty score. You can see that each detection has its own set of scores in the screenshot. These scores are loosely used with other factors to calculate the host's overall threat and certainty scoring. I would like to note at this point that the host and detection scores can range from 0 to 99. Those are the minimum and maximum. This will provide some context into some of the additional scores that I mentioned later on. On day 4, the actor utilized Mimikatz and was able to extract a useful credential from memory. This credential was then used to perform RPC calls via WMI towards a smaller number of target hosts. At this point, the EDR client installed on the machine triggered an alert for the WMI usage. This usage was noticed by the SOC based on the alert and generated a ticket for their investigation. The usage of the credential that was obtained to perform the RPC calls also triggered a detection in Detect called Privilege Anomaly, Unusual Service Insider. Subsequently, the endpoint protection on the employee's machine detected the presence of the Mimikatz executable 30 minutes after it was ran. The executable was subsequently deleted from the system by the endpoint protection. At this point, in Detect, with the additional detected behavior in the lateral movement category, this caused the host to be prioritized deeply into the critical quadrant. The host had a new threat score of 99 and 79 for certainty, based on this additional detection triggered by the abnormal Kerberos credential usage. It was at this point the SOC recognized that they were dealing with an incident based on the alerts they received and the multiple attack behaviors detected by Cognito. After an initial investigation with Detect, Recall, and their EDR, the SOC confirmed that a threat actor was present. The SOC was able to identify the actor's C2 servers and blocked access to them. The customer asked Vectra and their other security vendors for assistance with the investigation and to help assess the scope of the attack. Recall was utilized to determine that the actor collected a significant number of files from domain controller sysvolume shares. It is believed that the actor was looking for hard-coded passwords and scripts or other files on those shares. Recall also helped identify that the actor was using WebDAV to access a small number of web servers, attempting to identify any files of interest. The recall data also provided visibility into where the compromised credential had been used. Additionally, by reviewing the Kerberos and NTLM metadata available in recall. Ultimately, with recall's metadata, it was determined that the actor's lateral spread was limited and no further compromised machines were identified outside of those that had already alerted on or were identified with the recall metadata. So in this incident, what could we take away? The first thing is actors use good tradecraft. They were able to deliver a weaponized payload, even though there was no gap in the perimeter security stack. Additionally, the customer SOC was able to identify an attacker quickly, utilizing multiple tools, and contain that attacker, halting them, halting that actor's progress. Recall provided a great visibility into the actor's actions on the network, helping to identify the scope of the attack, including where that compromised credential was used, and also identify that no other data had been obtained, as well as confirming the overall scope of the lateral spread. So fundamentally, the actor was contained before they found or gained access to any key intellectual property, which was a clear win for the customer and the SOC team in this use case. So this was a pretty short and sweet use case where Cognito helped this particular customer in conjunction with other tools that customer provided. So happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
We have a couple that were asking kind of like what happened to the employee, or could things have been prevented with better employee training, if you want to address those.
Yes, I think those are great. Those are quite great questions. So to my knowledge, the employee was not, reprimanded or punished in any way or dismissed, to the best of my knowledge. I think they definitely were counseled, and additional training was provided, because this incident for sure helped identify a potential gap in employee training, right? Trying to understand when an actor may be, socially engineering them to take advantage of a situation in this case. And I do see the follow-on question regarding the better employee training. So I do believe additional employee training, specifically around this type of social engineering, was built for their customer community, or their employee community. So looking at the next question coming in from, what made the third attempt work? The document, I believe, based on what the customer suspected, is that the OS version and potentially the architecture of the underlying hardware was different compared to what the attacker had compiled their implant for, or excuse me, not the implant, but the the implant that was retrieved by the macro in the document. So the customer suspects that it was, the first time, obviously, the document was attempted to be viewed on the employee's phone, which I personally assume it wasn't designed to be operable from or be accessible from. So the second time the document was delivered, where it was accessed from the employee's laptop, I believe it was a mismatch in architecture, or a mismatch in the OS at that point, that led to the issue. And I believe essentially the second time around, the document was delivered to the laptop, it was the correct architecture of the correct OS. I didn't get a lot of details from the customer on that.
Awesome. We have some that were asking if the employee got the job. I saw that one come in a couple of times.
uh, Probably safe to say that no, most likely not.
And then another one, similar to the past, but slightly different take. They were asking, did the employee realize that something was wrong on their laptop at all? Did it act strangely, or did the attacker just move on to the other targets?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, to the best of my knowledge, the employee was totally unaware that an actor had compromised their laptop and was using it as a pivot point into the the enterprise network. So best that I know is that the end user was completely unaware of the fact.
And then a nice follow-up to that one. Someone else was asking, do you know when the attacker realized the organization knew, and if they tried anything else to penetrate the organization?
Yeah, that is a great question. So from my conversations with the customer, I don't believe they tipped their hand at all as far as taking machines off the network or isolating or quarantining machines prior to actually blocking the identified command control channel. So the customer was went through significant effort to identify all suspected command and control communications, because there were a couple of different C2 channels that were being utilized. And once they felt they had a good handle on what those were, they blocked those with their at their border firewalls and with their cloud-based security stack. And I would assume that's when the actor realized that they had been identified. I do believe there were some other phishing attempts actual phishing attempts at this point, that may have been from that same actor, but I didn't get any real information that corroborated that from the customer.
Thank you. This other one I think is a really interesting point. They're asking about social engineering, and it's kind of coming from, we're in a virtual setting now, really since the start of 2020. And so there's less person-to-person interaction. So I think this one is a good one to jump into a little more. They were wondering if there's social engineering actors that maybe the customer revealed some technical information to, that allowed the threat actor to jump in and get some of that and more easily penetrate the organization.
Yeah. So I think in general, in this case here, the manner in which the actor reached out to the customer, I think, is kind of explained or may tell us how the actor gained information on the customer. So they actually reached out to him through a social networking platform. I really don't want to name a name per se, but it's I would assume most of us probably belong to it. It's more of a professional a targeted type of social network. So through that platform, it's pretty easy for anybody to identify employees of a particular company, even targeting down to a particular role, or maybe even a particular department within that company. So the customer felt that the actor gathered information and found this employee through that social network, through that platform.
Thank you so much. The next two go hand in hand. If you could elaborate on any other tools that the company also identified the malicious activity, or if Vectra was really the only tool that identified the anomaly.
Yeah, so there were three tools that identified activity. The first that the customer was alerted to was actually their EDR product. So their EDR product fired an alert that you had generated a ticket that their SOC worked based on the WMI usage from that source machine. Now, Vectra Cognito Detect was actually the first tool to fire any alerts at all, but based on how The host was prioritized at that point, just after the initial reconnaissance that was performed by that threat actor. It was not prioritized enough to have triggered a similar workflow for that SOC. So once, so essentially the initial ticket that was created was based on the EDR, but Vectra, they quickly pivoted into Vectra, found that Vectra also had triggered some detection. So essentially some alerts within, detect that help corroborate that potentially they have an incident on their hand at that point. And then the other tool that provided an alert was their endpoint protection, which is, in their case, a separate endpoint client compared to their EDR. And that had triggered towards the end of everything, 30 minutes after Mimikatz had ran. So even though it is a protection client, it didn't prevent the execution of Mimikatz, which I think the customer was a little, little disappointed with, but it detected the presence of the executable and cleaned it off the machine after it had already been run.
Great. This one I think is an interesting one, a little bit more non-technical, but was the actor ever identified and addressed by the authorities?
Yeah, so the threat actor group that the customer and the FBI feel this was Lazarus. So they believe it was the North Koreans.
Wow. It's always interesting to see like who the threat actors were and where they're originating from. The next one here, I think is really interesting in terms of like when an organization identifies something, like what they're sharing with other organizations. And so the person is asking, would this type of attack be shared with other organizations that were developing vaccines to give them a heads up that they might also be attacked?
I don't have data on or information on whether this particular customer, belonged to any like special interest group or had any kind of affiliate, ties with, other institutions that, perform the same kind of work. I do know that there were some similar types of attacks against other organizations, other institutions that fall within the same vertical, but I honestly do not know whether there was any information sharing to be open.
Someone was also wanting to know a little bit more. They were saying that, or they had pointed out that it seemed that a 30-minute window for show to detection of the EDR seems a little bit slow. If you could elaborate on that or maybe clarify that point.
Yeah. I don't have any technical, understanding or details on why they're, basically their antivirus client. So what wasn't actually the EDR in this case, it was more of your traditional antivirus type of client. I do not know why it took the AV client, 30 minutes to detect the executable, but that's essentially based, what the customer had, the information the customer had provided back to us during our, working sessions with them is that, they could see from the EDR perspective when Mimikatz was executed, had those timestamps, and it was 30 minutes past that timestamp when they had a log from their endpoint protection, their AV client, that indicated, the Mimikatz executable was detected and cleaned. I honestly was never provided any further information on why that client, had such a long gap in time from when the executable was run to when it was essentially identified. I'm sorry, Kate, don't have information for you.
No worries. I know that a lot of these questions, it's a matter of gathering the data and kind of being able to do it on the spot. That wraps up the live Q&A that we have here. If you have any other questions, feel free to submit those. Otherwise, Matt, I'll kind of turn it over to you if you want to say any last closing words. I also noted to the audience too, if you want to continue the conversation outside of a Q&A with Matt, he will be available in Slack at solutions-vectra. I know that they've also posted another side of the story here, so I did share that with everyone here. But Matt, if you want to say some last closing remarks.
Yeah, I would just like to say that, like most organizations, right, having multiple tools that provide different visibility or give you different protection within your enterprise is always a good practice. And I think, this use case here calls out the fact that, having, endpoint protection and an EDR, and then also a product like what Vectra provides to provide, network visibility, behavior-based detection, helps a customer be very well rounded and provide a lot of visibility and just overall protection, for their SOC and for their, security teams. And I appreciate everybody's time today sitting in on the session. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Matt. Everyone, have a great day. And then if you want to jump back to the main session channel, just refresh your Summit Access page and you can do that. And then you can also continue to connect with Matt here in Slack. Thank you so much.